Hello, today we're going to look at the difference between the 106 and the 60. Now that Roland have brought us both in one box, it's much easier to look at them both from each of their perspectives. Here's a magazine from '86, and even at this time the Roland JU06 was on its way out. They were being sold for a song. Now, many thought at the time that the JU06 was a 60 with MIDI, but no, they were quite different from each other, and in this video we'll see just how different, in which aspects they were different. Before we begin here, we'll just take a look at the differences between VCO and DCO. The voltage controlled oscillator, as its name implies, the oscillator runs all the while, and the actual pitch is controlled by a DC voltage from the keyboard. VCOs were very expensive to produce when you've got many of them, as in a polysynth, and it was almost impossible to get their behaviour exactly the same. The DCO was a different kind of oscillator. It didn't run at all until it had a pitch controlling pulse in. It was more of a wave shaper than an oscillator really, because without the pitch controlling pulses it gave nothing. Now, the way the pitch controlling pulse was produced in the Junos was achieved quite differently, and it gives different results. Let's just look at that. First we can look at the architecture of the 106. In the time between when the 60 was made, the advances in microprocessor speeds meant that more was be able to be done with the processor by the time the 106 came. This meant the 106 had a 12 MHz processor scanning the keyboard, generating the timing pulses. It also did the LFO, envelopes, portamento, bender, and all the MIDI control. The octave division from the processor was pitch and phase perfect and gave a digital sounding precision to the 106. The timing pulses for the Ju06 came from a 1.9 MHz VCO, which feeds a digital counter, and the machine's processor feeds the counter with the right division information to give the right pitch for the DCOs. Now, one's not to think that this VCO makes the audible information here, as it is just a master clock generator for a divide down chain, a bit like the organs of that time. Unlike the 106, the dividing chain does not give perfect pitches across the octaves. Now, this imperfection with the pitch gives the 60 a bit of real VCO character, and even before you turn on the chorus there's movement between the DCO pitches. Let's take a listen to that. Next we come to the filter of the two Junos. The Ju06 used the old IR3109 chip, whereas the Ju06 used a module called 817A. Now, according to the circuit diagram for the 106, there is an IR3109 chip inside this module, but for some reason they sound different, and that has to do with how much oscillator saturation is driven into each filter. On the 60, the volume of the DCO is fed in quite high, and that gives a different sound, especially when the resonance is put up. In the Juno 106, the oscillator amplitude is not quite so high, so when the resonance is up, the filter sounds more whistly, a bit like the old SH101. The other area where the two cents are different is the envelope times. The Juno 106 has got much longer envelope times than the 60. But if you want some of the shortest envelope times, then the 106 can't quite do as well as the 60. The 60 had an analog envelope generator, whereas the envelopes come out of the processor in the 106. So for those snappy, clicky envelopes, the 60 wins there. When it comes to the chorus, the 106 had a much less noisy chorus than the 60. The 60 got a lot of critique for just having a noisy chorus. But I think the only way they managed to do that was put a high-cut filter in the 106. And that high-cut filter has also affected the overall sound of it. The synth sounds much softer. It hasn't quite got that cutting top end that the 60 had. For me, that ruins the 106. For me, this does as a replacement for the 60 that I had during the 80s. I'm quite happy with this. 4 notes of polyphony, okay, you can live with that if you're going to use it in a recording environment. If you're going to use it live, then you'll be finding that 4 notes will end up with clipping of voices. But, well, that you'll have to decide for yourself. But I like this. Glad I bought it.